Greetings, my excellent friend.
Welcome to Most Excellent Adventure to
Heavy Metal
History.
Cool. All right, so I'm sitting here with Blothar from GWAR, and thank you for doing this.
Hey, no problem, man.
So the album.
What I do.
What's that?
I said it's what I do.
Yeah. You're the spearhead now, man.
I am.
So we're gonna
The
do
tip
this.
Of the dick.
Yes, you do. You carry 2 dicks, or wait, is it 4 now?
4 dicks, yeah.
4 dicks, yeah.
Only 2 of them, though.
So what we're gonna do on this, man? We're gonna go back about 25 years. We're gonna talk about This Toilet Earth. It's gonna be celebrating a 25th anniversary this year. How crazy is that?
Pretty crazy.
So
Pretty
I mean,
dang crazy.
yeah. I mean, back then, this is your 4th album. I mean, would you have thought back then that you are going to be where you're at right now with the band? I mean, it's hard to think that far ahead when you're there, but where was the band at during this time?
No, I mean, I absolutely would not have thought that at the time because, I was playing bass guitar and, happy in that role. I mean, I was singing. I mean, I had sang for GWAR. I mean, that's why probably why I'm singing for GWAR now is because, I had written a lot of songs and sang a lot. I mean, that record was a big one.
Yeah.
A bit for us. It was the first time we did a kind of in-house production, but it was, using the producer was this guy named Scott Wolf, who's from Richmond. And it was a lot of fun making that record. I mean, and it was, there's a lot of good material on This Toilet Earth. It's a very different GWAR record than we had made up to that point. And, right after that, I mean, I didn't really do very much of the touring for Toilet Earth like that.
Yeah, I saw that you had left the band pretty soon after the recording was done.
Yeah, I did. And that's because I had my other band. I mentioned singing, I had started singing in Keepone, which was my other band. We had a few records out on Touch and Go and traveled a bunch. And, so that was, but yeah, I mean, I separated from GWAR right after the record came out. And then that was the first one we did with Pete Lee playing guitar too. And he was a really, really great player. I mean, I think for my money, I mean, a lot of people talk about, GWAR's had a lot of good guitar players.
Yeah.
I feel like Pete Lee was really, one of the best. I mean, a lot of people look at Smoot and say that Cory was great. He definitely was, but Pete just had a real sort of versatility and an understanding about a lot of different kinds of music, and he's just sort of very naturally talented. So it was fun making the record with him, and there was some, like I said, I mean, it wasn't musical. I just needed to go off and do some other stuff, but I mean, I had no idea. I never could have imagined that. And I couldn't even have imagined it when I got the news that Dave had died, and I drove up to Richmond that day. I mean, when they told me, when Bobby told me, Bob Gorman called and told me, I was living in the mountains, and I was teaching. It had been teaching at the University of Virginia, and I was between contracts. And I had been applying for jobs to be a music professor at other universities in Virginia. And I wound up when he told me, I just got in the car and drove straight to Richmond. The minute he told me, I just put my shit up, grabbed my dogs, and went.
Yeah.
And And, you know, so even that day though, I couldn't. And then afterwards, you know, when they were talking about, well, we needed to do the barbecue, and, you know, it'd be night, like they were going to lose a ton of money if they hadn't have gone ahead with that show. So we talked about it, and what I thought we were going to do, I remember being very surprised. I figured, like, okay, well, I'll help you put together this show. And, you know, I imagined that I would come out in my beef costume, and we'd have two beefcakes somehow. And I would say, yeah, I had no idea what was going to happen, you know, and like I was going to sing just the songs that I had already sung for GWAR, like, you know, just the tunes that I had already done. Because you could probably put together almost a set with those.
Yeah.
Or songs that I had sung like a lot of, or originally sung, because there's a lot of, like, there's a big story behind a lot of GWAR tunes. And, you know, there are several that I wrote that I originally sang, but then Dave would eventually sing in the long run, you know, like, and I mean, Road Behind would be an example of that. Like, but there's a bunch of other ones too. So that's what I thought was going to happen. But when we went into, you know, that's just not how it happened. I mean, they tried to do some other tunes, and I still never. It was hard for me to imagine, really, right up until the moment we did that show. But once we actually did it, and once we actually, I could tell it was going to work. After we, you know, like after the barbecue show. So I mean, that's probably a longer answer than I wanted, but that's the truth. You know, it's like, so yeah, I had no idea, could never have known. But I really like this Toilet Earth. I mean, it's my favorite GWAR album from the old days.
Yeah, you know, it's
my favorite one that I was on. They made ones that I liked probably better even when I wasn't in the band, but I really did like that record.
It's kind of funny because I didn't get into GWAR until like way later in the discography, but this was the one album that everybody always told me was like, you have to listen to this GWAR album after, you know, I found the first couple ones. And funny enough, I guess I'm going to kind of jump around here to the other stuff that I wanted to talk about. But my first introduction to you guys, probably with maybe a lot of people or a whole generation, was the movie Empire Records. And I remember seeing that scene with you guys, and I thought that it was just something that the movie had made. I didn't realize you guys were a real band, because I was so young at that time. And then finding out you guys were real, I was like, there's no fucking way this band's real. How does that, you know, my little brain couldn't like comprehend that this was a real band. And it was so awesome to me finding that out at a young age, that it was indeed a real band.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah, I know a lot of people think things like that, though. Like, GWAR, you know, we've gotten that quite a bit, where people think a lot of strange things about GWAR, period. I mean, there's people think that, and that was really always the case, you know. I mean, GWAR it's a hard band to be in. It's always been a hard band to be in, and it will always be a hard band to be in, because, and I talk about not knowing something, you know, I had no idea that was true. I mean, I knew it was probably true, but, you know, until I started my own band and we started riding around, and I'm like, wait a minute, you mean that we make way less money than GWAR, and yet individually we're all making more money? You know, because there's not 18 of us. Wow, that's wild. You know, like, you know, and we're cruising around, like, and you know, of course, in the early days, like, I mean, even when this Toilet Earth came out, we were riding around in a school bus.
Yeah.
That was, you know, we didn't have tour buses. But that was the first album where we got a tour bus. And I left, like, I was around for like one tour in a tour bus, and then I split. And but the first part of it, we didn't have one. I remember like the first sort of leg of the touring, and GWAR did a lot more touring back then. There was for one thing, we did a lot of European dates and a lot of stuff like that. And I mean, we always had tour buses in Europe, I guess. But,
yeah. How much of a pain in the ass was that to get all the costumes over to Europe?
Oh man, I mean, we used to have. There's this company called Rocket Cargo, and it just sort of never even occurred to us. Like, and that's the weird thing about GWAR. Like, another weird thing is that, like, we never thought to ourselves, well, we'll take less stuff. Like, so we can make money. Like, I mean, we never would have done something like that. Like, so I mean, back then. So, and in retrospect, I'm glad we didn't, because I think we made a really big impression.
Yeah.
But I know that if we went to Europe right now, the majority of people who came to see the show would be there for the first time. And, so we could probably get away with taking a little less stuff, but it was a huge hassle. I mean, basically we had to pack these massive red costume boxes and put them on boats. Like they went on a boat.
Whoa.
Before we went. Yeah. Well, you can't, there's not even a plane that's big enough to fly that shit. Like,
yeah.
Like you can't get, I mean, there is, but that's not how they really move cargo. Like they put things like that. They put shipping containers on boats, and that's what we had to do, So then we had to get the stuff, go and pick up the stuff at the boat. And then we had our, loaded into our truck. And that's the other thing, is that GWAR always, even now, if you come to a GWAR show early, like, some of the people that sign up for the VIP experience, like, I think I can see that they're curious that, Mike Dirks, who plays ball sack, is out there schlepping around cables and equipment,
yeah.
But that's what we do. I mean, not me, because I'm the singer, and singers don't do anything.
That's true.
But, yeah. But the other guys are working their asses off. So it's a big hassle. But, I just remember how different it was when I went out with Keepone, and I could see, like, both that, like, the money was better, and also that, there was just, it was not difficult. It's like,
it's a lot less stressful on your end.
Yeah, it's a lot less effort, man. I mean, you don't get, even now, like GWAR, like we just played in Indianapolis, at this place called the Vogue, and very typically, when we play places that don't have a dressing room, like, GWAR just isn't a band that can't have a dressing room or a backstage area. Like, so we have to, but we play places where we don't. And the Vogue is a classic one. We always play in the middle of winter or in Halloween in the fall. Usually both at that place. And we always have to dress in the back of the semi. So like,
my gosh.
we're in the back. We're in the back of this big 18-wheeler. We set up sort of a makeshift dressing room, and then, the biggest part, the part that I hate about that, though, it's not even getting dressed out there. It's walking down the little ramp to get out of the damn thing, which is just like, in those hooves, you just feel like you're going to die. And yeah, you do. And I've actually seen Mike fall in the hooves, like, coming down.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about those costumes. For as long as you guys have been wearing them, there's always some challenge that you're going to have to deal with, whether it be on stage or off stage. And it's just like maddening to think that a lot of people don't realize that aspect of it. They think you're just there on stage ready to go and nothing's going to go wrong. But man, those costumes are bulky as shit. And I can't imagine that something doesn't fuck up or go wrong every day.
You're right. I mean, and it does go wrong. It just constantly goes wrong. Like, that's just what GWAR is, like, a series of things going wrong. but that's what it seems like, but it's still a lot of fun. I mean, it's just, nothing feels like walking out on stage, in a GWAR costume, and nothing feels like, people seeing the band for the first time, like just the reactions that you get. But yeah, I mean, GWAR that's the other aspect of it, is that it's really hard to play in the costumes. It's really hard even to do something like, this is why, like, sort of why Dave was so great, because he really seemed unaffected by the costume, especially in the early days. Like, he was able to really throw himself into singing. And that's really hard to do in that costume. Like, to really sell out, like, where you're just, utterly about the singing, right? Like, that gets difficult to do. It's probably why I move around less than what people perceive that I do than Dave did, is, because I'm thinking about the singing a lot. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to play. It's difficult. Mike Dirks has not seen his fretboard for 25 years, or longer.
Jeez.
Like, he's been playing without. Yeah, he can't see his guitar. So, like, he just knows what to play and does it. But yeah, those costumes are difficult, and GWAR gets a lot of criticism. I always want to say, tell somebody, like, be like, all right, well, here, fucking suit up, go out there, like, play one of these tunes, like, it's hard. And tons of ridiculous things happen, like the antlers. I've been insane in interviews sometimes. Like, Blothar's natural enemy is the stage curtain. Like, it's just, I can't. It's just constantly getting caught in shit. And there's places where we play where, like, I remember like because we don't think vertically a lot of times. We'll be on stage. They'll set up the ego riser, is what we call it. There's a little sort of step that I step up on to give me more height, and I will get up on that thing, and the antlers would just get caught in the lights that are up above the stage.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, shit like that happens. Like, it's all kinds of dumb stuff, but it's still a lot of, the chaos is what makes it fun.
I think that's one of the things about the band that's always been, like, part of your mystique, is, like, the chaos aspect of it, with all the costumes, the immense amount of adversity the band has been through since, like, day one, and just the show itself. And it just kind of culminates into everything that GWAR is. And that's what I like about the band, is, like, and you're still going. I mean, it's insane to me that even, 30 years later, you guys are still just going. And I think a lot of bands would have folded many, many times with all the stuff that you had to deal with as a band.
You're absolutely right. I mean, 100% right. That, like, GWAR would not have been, or most bands would not have survived what GWAR has survived. And it's amazing, even to the people in the band.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That we survived it. Though, like, I mean, just some real talk right here. Like, one thing that people don't understand, the fact that GWAR could keep going after losing Dave is really a function of how GWAR is set up and how it works and how it's different than other bands, where, like, the first thing you have to understand is this absolutely improbable relationship that we have with one another that got set up a long time ago when the band got started. And, just the name, like, people wonder about that, like, well, Slave Pit, like the name of this sort of production company that makes GWAR. Mm-hmm. It was born of a group of artists that just sort of dedicated themselves to working and making art for this rock band. And like the ethos that was around it was like one of work. Like, you know, we get together and we throw down on making stuff and coming up with ideas. And we're dedicated to one another, like in this process, like, and believe me, man, I mean, you know, when I left the band, I thought, you know, at various times, like afterwards, I was like, well, I'll start something, you know, we'll have a show, you know, another thing with a show. Well, you can't find people to do that. Like, you cannot find people like Bob Gorman and Matt McGuire who make costumes. You know, you can't find people, Don Draculich, who are willing to do that. You know, that sort of, especially with the anonymity involved, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, you don't, it's not like you're getting sort of rock star points either. So it's you know, it's an unusual group of people who have an unusual relationship that over the years made it work. And the fact that each person was responsible for the voice of the band too, like, you know, and everybody knew what that was. So, you know, when Dave died, like, there's still this massive labor force that makes the costumes and that comes up with ideas. And his was only one voice. It's just that it was the loudest and the one that was up front. So
yeah,
well, people sort of thought that was the voice of the band. And I know a lot of people still think that, you know, and that it's gone and it won't be back. And they're right. It is gone and it won't be back. There's really not anything we can do about that. But, and I'll also say this, that there's not a person in GWAR that doesn't wish that were different.
Sure.
Even me, right? I mean, like, or maybe even especially me. I'm not sure that, you know, I mean, there's other stuff that I could be doing, but it's, you know, I mean, even that, like, coming back was like, I mean, you know, I knew that these guys wanted to keep going. I like them all very much. And, you know, so they're also really lucky, you know, like, I mean, I remember thinking about that even before I came back. I was like, the one thing that sucks about not doing this anymore is not getting to ride around with this group of people who I really like every single day, you know, and like waking up and you're with people that you'd hang out with anyway, right? So it's nice to be back in that fold.
You know, I think the one thing that my takeaway from when Dave passed was, you know, obviously all the comments on the internet were like, oh, the band's done, don't care, whatever. And then when you guys started playing shows and putting out records, it was still like, no, it's not the same, it's not the same. But I think that's fucking wrong and completely ridiculous, because obviously you guys, like you said, you all collectively do stuff in the band. You love the band. You don't want to see it die. And on top of that, keeping going after Dave died is just an extension of keeping his memory alive. So, like, why wouldn't people want to see GWAR put out music or, you know, go to the shows? Because it's a show. It's not really Dave up there. Like, yeah, like you said, he's a part of it, but it's to see the show and hear the music. Like, and then while you're there, you can remember Dave at the same time, and Cory, you know, like, it's really silly to me that people get so, I guess, uptight about losing a member. And I get it. It's probably part of a grieving process too, you know?
Right. And we always build that into every show.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, like, you know, some of that, you know, we always acknowledge Dave and when oftentimes Cory too. I mean, but definitely, like, you know, we talk about Odorous, and there's moments in the show when we that are about that. And, you know, I mean, yeah, like Pink Floyd doesn't really do that with Syd Barrett, right? It's like, you know, AC/DC doesn't do it with Bon Scott. I mean, but yeah, that's what we do. And you're right. I mean, it is keeping the band alive. You know, people are just cynical, man, and like, and then they also, there's this an attitude that I kind of do understand is they don't want, if their memory of it, they don't want their memory of what it was to be different. I understand that too. It's like, I tell you one thing that's very interesting is that ever since the Warped Tour, when we tried this thing where we were collecting, we had people text in, and we put up on the screens, we put an ad like, text, GWAR for this sweepstakes thing.
Okay.
And when people did that, we asked them, like, have you seen the band before? Or how many GWAR shows have you seen? And the majority, like, we just got this information back. We had a meeting yesterday where we looked at it and we were all shocked that, like, almost half of the audience are people who've never seen the band before.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, like, isn't it? Like, we had no idea. I mean, we were like, wow. And I mean, it's almost half. Like, it's more than a third, between a third and half. If you look at it on a little bar graph, it's just amazing. Like, I mean, the number of people we always thought, I remember thinking that the answer to that question would be more like, in the 2 to 3 range or something like that, and then probably more that, like, we always imagined that there were people who'd been coming to the shows for a really long time that were there. And that's probably because, like, we see people that are there all the time, so we recognize them in each town. But yeah, it was very, very enlightening.
Yeah, I think Warped Tour is a different. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say my point there is just that, there are people who haven't seen the band with Dave singing. You know, so like, yeah.
Yeah, I think Warped Tour is like a whole different demographic. So it's cool to see that people were seeing you for the first time on that tour, and I'm sure that opened up like a lot of people to your discography. At least I would hope so, especially if you're getting like over half.
Yeah. Yep.
That's cool.
Totally.
That's really cool. So we got off on a bit of a tangent there. Let's get back to this Toilet Earth. You were talking about Pete Lee and his guitar playing, and one of the things about this record that I fucking love about it is, it's not just a metal record. He does a really good job. The band as a whole does a really good job of fusing like punk and metal and ska and funk. You got like all these disparate genres in there, and they're all just kind of thrown together, but they work together really well. And I think that's something that's really rare, and it's probably why this record's probably one of your more prolific ones in your discography, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, there is a backstory to the musicians, to the music in GWAR that a lot of people have absolutely no knowledge of at all. And that is that, the musicians that are in GWAR were like really kind of among the best punk and metal musicians that were in Richmond at the time, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we had cool players and original players, and they're very different. And a lot of it had to do with coming from punk. Like, it was punk. It was the punk scene in Richmond that produced GWAR, and the players were all players who were in punk bands. And then, once we, it's kind of like you put these guys in costumes and they start writing music from the viewpoint of aliens. But so like, I mean, people don't have any sense of that, but like, the players in GWAR were pretty special players. And, it sucks in a way that they've been in this band where like the emphasis shifts so much on the visual side that people either dismiss them as players, or they don't notice that they're good, or I mean, they think all kinds of crazy shit, that they play with that is recorded music, just all kinds of things. I've heard a lot of different stuff like that, but I mean, yeah, GWAR, like I said, I mean, a couple of things. Like, first, that it was focused on punk, and it was punk players playing metal, and that changed gradually. Like, they started getting other guitar players, and also Brad, the drummer, and Mike, the guitar player, started focusing more on. I mean, they just kind of learned over the years how to play metal, but neither of them really were out of that scene. Like, that they and myself included. Like, we all had. I mean, Brad was in a band that was just a really diverse kind of pop band. Mike Dirks is a guitar player who is probably, to me, Mike Dirks is the most underrated guitarist in heavy metal. I really think that. Like, I think
I would agree
that people don't they don't realize what a good player ball sack is, and how original he is, because you don't pull out, like, I mean, like metal guitarists, you always hear, like, especially when they're like, they'll be like, I'm very influenced by Paganini and, a Segovia, and also, like, that's them trying to be sort of expansive, and, it really just means that, I don't know, it's just dumb. And, but Dirks, like, I mean, this is a guy whose favorite guitar player is Elliot Eastman from the Cars.
Yeah.
And also, like, the guy from Muse, like, that's the guy he really likes now is the guitar player from Muse. And it's all about, like, it just, like, his approach to guitar, but he loves metal. I mean, like, he listens to it and knows how to play it now, but he does it through that mindset, like a guitar player that's not afraid to use effects, that's not afraid to, he has a theremin. People don't even see it. There's a theremin up there.
Damn.
That he's playing during the set. Yeah, and people don't see it. They don't see. They don't. I mean, because we don't make a big deal out of it, and there's so much other shit going on that they're not going to notice what this guy's doing back there. But he's, got a very sophisticated rig set up, and he's very into sort of guitar technology and things like that. So, it's they're interesting players, and that record, This Toilet Earth, it was the first one with Pete, and Pete, like I said, he was also diverse in that way, like, except for he could really slam down leads, and he had there's a lot more blues in what Pete did than either the stuff before or after it, so, like, This Toilet Earth has that the benefit of having sort of the earliest Pete Lee songs on it, and I don't know. I mean, I really liked that. It's the only record that had me and Pete playing together on it.
Oh, really? So,
I mean, yeah, it is. It's the only record we did.
Damn.
Because, Scumdogs was me, Mike, and Dewey Rowell, who was the first flautist, writing music, and then Brockie would write, like, he would write at least a song or two on every record, musically.
Mm-hmm.
Because Dave he was a pretty good bass player. Then, so, like, Scumdogs was that, and then after that you had America Must Be Destroyed, and Dewey had left, so it was basically me and Mike and Tim Harris, who was the guitar player for Keepone, that did a lot of the sort of recording on that record, playing leads, and actually we brought in a lot of other guitar players. Brian Pacino was one who came in that had played with Brad before, and then so This Toilet Earth was the first one where sort of the band had gotten a new lineup, and me and Pete, and then, like, I did that record and then I left. So then afterwards, like, the records they did after, like Carnival of Chaos and that stuff. That was with Pete and Casey Orr.
Okay.
From the Rigor Mortis. So and Ministry, I guess Casey was in that band too. But yeah, so it's like the only record we did like that, and it was cool. I mean, Pete Lee's like the stuff Pete's doing now is cool. Like he has this band from Texas that's pretty cool. I can't remember having a hard time remembering the name right now, but anyway, they're good.
Yeah, having to deal with that many lineup changes, it's obviously going to evolve and change the sound over time, but it also makes each album pretty unique and stand out, on its own, depending on who's on that record. And I don't always think lineup changes are a bad thing, but I think it's worked for GWAR pretty well, whether or not it was on good terms or bad terms or whatever. But yeah, it's always hard when you have to lose a member of a band.
No, it is, and it has worked. And like it's like this is the same thing with Blood of Gods is like coming out of the other side of that. The thing that I was most happy about is that it still sounds like a GWAR record.
Yep.
That's the kind of quiet achievement that people don't understand about that record. It's like, yeah, it has some tunes on it, but man, we made a GWAR record without Dave Brockie, and like it was not a given that we would be able to do that when we went in the studio. I mean, it wasn't a given when we were laying down the fucking tracks that it was going to happen. So like, the fact that it came out the other end of that process sounding like a GWAR record to me is just fucking amazing. Like, I mean, it's the biggest achievement of that record. And this Toilet Earth, like, I mean, at that point, like, we were really at sort of the height of our powers as far as, making GWAR songs and stuff like that. And that record has a lot of narrative on it.
Yeah.
But there's all kinds of tunes on, like, there's some tunes on it that are really special. I mean, I love Sonder Commando. And that's a song that really sounds very Richmond, right? It's like, it has it sounds like a lot of the best bands that were coming out of Richmond at the time. And so does the song Issue of Tissue, Space Cake. Like, I mean, that song has you listen to Space Cake, there's a part in the middle of it that's like fucking, it's a King Crimson,
Yeah.
It's like this weird, and that's all like those tones. The reason it sounds like King Crimson is because of Dirks's like crazy, like the chords that he played, like it's just insane, weird textures that are on it. I mean, Mike and Pete worked together really well. Pete was sort of a little more traditional, or a lot more traditional as a guitar player. And Mike just, the other thing is that Dirks, I mean, now, not to toot my horn, but I mean, now, because I have I got a PhD in music. So I had to learn music theory along the way, right? Like it's,
Yeah.
But back then, like, I didn't know it for shit. Pete knew it instinctively, though he probably couldn't speak about it. And like a lot of rock guitar players, but Dirks had been to school for music as well, so he he just had some really cool like add 9 chords in there and weird sort of out stuff that it was the first record where he really sort of stretched his legs in that way, because like, I mean, when we did America Must Be Destroyed, we were kind of just panicked. It's like, how are we going to do this without a lead guitar player, because we didn't have one. So, and GWAR, there's a surprising number of GWAR records that were made without a lead guitar player. Like, I mean, We Kill Everything. There was no, like, we also got Tim Harris to play on that record. And, there wasn't any lead guitar player on that. And you listen to the record, there's hardly any leads on it. Like, you know, because I mean that's the one thing Dirks doesn't do.
Yeah.
Though I wish he would, because he's actually very good at it, and interesting at it. But like, you know, he's a little conscious that like it's not a traditional lead, right? Like he's not going to rip out, you know, something that Cory could have done, right? Like, you know, he's not going to lay down a lead, or that Brent could do now, Brent Ferguson. You know, he's not going to play leads like that, but he does play really. It's more like if I had to pin down some guitar players, Greg Ginn,
Oh yeah.
Steve Albini. So it's like Big Black, Black Flag, you know, Thurston Moore, Sonic Youth kind of shit. That's what he does, you know. So it's you put that inside of a metal band, and then you put that band in these freaky fucking costumes, you know, and it has a lot to do with the sound of GWAR. And, you know, and by that record, Brad and Mike and myself were playing together really, really instinctively and really tightly, you know, like even now, like, you know, I mean, on the last record that we did, it's like, you know, when you bring up Dirks' tracks with Brad, they're just locked in a way that's, you know, almost hard to describe. It's, you know, they play together really well.
Yeah, because I mean, you guys have been playing together for so long. It's just like you've refined everything to the point where you're just comfortable knowing where your partner's going to be at in the song or band or whatever you're doing, and it just flows naturally at that point, right?
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Yeah. So with This Toilet Earth, how much of it did you do any like pre-production time on it, or were you guys like kind of writing right after the third record and take your time with it? Like, what was the writing cycle like for that record?
The writing cycle for This Toilet Earth was that we had started. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I get it. It's 25 years. That's a long time to remember shit. I'm always enthralled when somebody's like, I can remember this no problem. Whereas like me, I'd probably like, I don't know what I did 25 years ago.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to think like if we. What I remember about the record is that we went in. We had a new studio space that we had gotten, and you know, like, and it was a whole new slave pit, like, you know, so it was this big building. You know, we had good management. We had just made a good, you know, we were getting ready to make a good film.
Yeah.
For it, and doing a lot of video stuff. And you know, we had a ton of tunes that were left over from America Must Be Destroyed, and you know, so there wasn't a lot of, you know. Then we had Pete. We brought Pete in, and Pete just kind of, you know, he had a couple of tunes too, so we worked on those. I'm trying to think, what exactly was the question again? Like, you're asking, like,
well, just kind of like, did you have any pre-production time on the record, or was everything like kind of written?
Right. No. Okay. Yeah. So, right. We did have pre-production, because, and I remember it was weird because it was like, so the way that record is very different than America Must Be Destroyed, other than the fact that Pete Lee is on it, is that America Must Be Destroyed was produced by Glenn Robinson, who is a professional producer who we asked particularly to do it because he was the producer of the Voivod album.
Mm-hmm.
Like a Voivod album. I think it might be called Nothing Face. I can't remember, but it's a good Voivod album. And we were big fans of Voivod. And so, you know, we managed to get Glenn to do it. And And he taught us a lot about the pre-production process. So we were trying to kind of do pre-production on our own because the producer we had was Scott Wolf, who was actually just one of our friends from Richmond, but he was a really talented engineer, and but not really a producer. He was more of an engineer. So we went into the record without, there wasn't anyone helping us arrange. So the songs were all arranged on our own, which was different than America Must Be Destroyed. Where, I mean, by and large, like the producer, they weren't changing arrangements, but they were definitely helping, and they were helping us pick out material and things like that, stuff that was worth working on versus what wasn't. And, so we didn't really have that on that record. Like, that's one way that it's different. So it's the first time. That's why I said it was in-house, right? It's like, we didn't have a producer that was helping us. And, so we did do a lot of pre-production. And back in those days, I don't know how we settled on this, but we were talking about this recently, that we would have we would build into the schedule that, GWAR rehearsed a lot. I mean, so we were playing 5 days a week. I was playing. Wow. We'd play 5 days a week, and and there was a day that we would set aside where Brad and I would play by ourselves, right? So once the material was kind of honed down, some of the arrangement was done by me and Brad playing alone, with bass and drums, and just trying to tighten it down that way with the rhythm section. Then that would lead to some sort of changes that were in the arrangements. But we were laughing about that the other day. We don't do that anymore, and they haven't done it for years. I guess they didn't do it since that record, have a rehearsal where it was just really focused on the drums and bass together. But, we did do that for that record. And it was, when we went in, we were really tight. The record was tracked in Richmond at a studio in a little area called Scott's Addition in Richmond, where our studio is now, actually.
Nice.
And it was a very small studio that was one of the only music studios in town, though. I mean, the rest of them were kind of geared towards ad work, and this was one that was in town that did a lot of music, and and we did a lot of records there. I mean, we tracked that record there. We also tracked We Kill Everything was tracked there. There were at least one Keepone album was tracked there as well.
Oh, nice.
So I mean, we just went in and did. It was a studio that had a nice room and some reasonable gear, and we did the tracking there, and then we mixed the whole thing up in Baltimore at a studio called Oz, which is actually now it's owned by Jay Robinson from the band Jawbox. Way back in the band, he was in Government Issue.
Okay.
But now he owns that studio. Back then it was ours, and it's weird. That was also when Pete got shot. Was during the mixing of This Toilet Earth. That was probably. It's weird. If you talk to people in the band, that's probably their greatest memory of recording that album, is that we were coming back from mixing the record. We had a video shoot to do for 2 songs on the record, and we had rented a bunch of cameras and lights, and we were going to shoot it down at the Slave Pit in Richmond. So we all piled into a station wagon, and we were riding back from Oz Baltimore to Richmond, and we were on this road called 295, north of Washington. We pulled off so we could all use the bathroom, and we just happened to sort of turn into a really, like, it was the weirdest thing, because, like, you know, the sign said aquarium, right?
Yeah.
You know, so, like, we're like, oh, okay, it's not going to be a bad part of town, right? Like, it's like a tourist thing, you know. So we pull off, but wow, it was like basically like driving into, you know, the worst neighborhood in Chicago. I mean, it was just a really bad neighborhood, lots of boarded up buildings and stuff like that, you know. And Pete wound up.
This is still like in the Baltimore area?
It was between. It's actually in the Washington. We were in, but we had gotten to Washington, but we were on a side of town where, like, you know, nobody had ever stopped before, and we got that we were involved in a what they think was the police thought it was a hit and run robbery, right? So I still don't think it was that planned. I think it was just sort of like, you know, something that happened by happenstance. This guy sort of turned in front of us, and we had this little fender bender with the guy. And while we were you know, we all get out of the car and we're talking about exchanging insurance information, but this guy was a thug. He had no interest in that. You know, he wanted money. He saw this as a chance to get money out of us right then and there. So, you know, he started showing that he had a pistol, and there were these two people who were standing on the corner and watching the whole thing go down. And I remember them walking over when they perceived that there was going to be a fight. Mm-hmm. And we all just kind of got in the car and started driving really fast. Like, the door was still open and the guy was hanging onto the car. I remember that. And as we were driving past, I saw one of those guys who had been watching, the two bystanders. One of them had a pistol, and he started shooting into the back of the station wagon. And Pete got shot. Because Pete was in the very back of the station wagon. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a bullet went through the back and hit him in the chest. Jesus. And you know, oh yeah, man. I mean, like, you know, so for the people in that band, like, when you think about this Toilet Earth, and especially the recording of it, that's mostly what they remember is this horrible incident that, like, you know, I mean, it's a long story. I mean, like, you know, we wound up pulling over on the side of the road because what happened was that Pete was like, I've been shot. And then we get on the highway, you know, back on the highway, and we're all just freaked out. And he starts saying he's been shot. And the sound man for Keepone, who was with us, he jumped over at the back and he started feeling, and he's like, and he pulled his hand back and you could see that there was blood all over his hand. So we were like, all right, well, he's really been shot. So we pull over and we're in the same fucking neighborhood, right? That we were in before. And we didn't, and we had, what happened was that when he was going over, he had wrecked, he had hit the guys who was driving. Straz hit his arm. So he hit the median strip, like there was the concrete barrier on the median strip, and it blew out one of the tires. So we had to pull off. So we pull off of the highway, and like I said, we're in the same neighborhood. So we're just running around screaming for somebody to call the police. But this is a neighborhood where, you know, nobody was going to answer the doors, you know. So, like, finally we beat on the door of this old man, and he, I guess, like, you know, a light came on. He looked out the door. He never said anything to us, but he called the police. So, you know, we're sitting there, and Pete is bleeding in the back of the station wagon. We had the back door down, and he was sitting on the back of it, like, you know, the back sort of tailgate thing. And we're standing around and freaked out, like, you know, because we didn't know if he was going to make it or not. And then a bunch of, suddenly, this brown, like, big late model American car comes up, and all 4 doors open, and these black dudes get out carrying guns. And we all ran because we thought that it was the guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't. They were police officers. So they tackled me. I remember that. They tackled all of us, and then sort of, started talking to us and figuring things out. And then we wound up taking Pete to a hospital, and even the hospital that he went was terrible. It was like, they had thick glass there, like at a liquor store that's in the ghetto, and they had a sort of the bed where they put Pete, the guy who was in the room with him, was handcuffed to the bed.
My gosh.
It's just oh man, it was a terrible scene, and very, very traumatic night. So that's sort of more than you bargained for there, but that's a story about this toilet.
I've only ever heard that Pete was shot. I never heard the story behind it. So that's crazy. Like, you guys never would have known that was going to happen just trying to like record and mix an album. And I mean, thank goodness he survived. That could have been way, way worse.
It could have been worse. But it was like, there were several things about it that were, it stayed with us for a while. I remember even that, it had, it's just like, we went down, like, there's this other aspect of GWAR, which is kind of weird, which is like, and it grows out of that slave mentality that we had, which is sort of the show must go on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you saw a little of that when Cory died and they continued on that tour, right? Like,
yeah.
To me, that was unfucking imaginable that they did that, but they did it. And, so like you mentioned sort of the band that's been through adversity, like, it's also a band that, because of the expense involved in the production, GWAR is always very close to the bone, so you were, and especially back then, and less so now because we have a little more room with the budgets and things like that. But like, back then, like, something like that could have devastated us just money wise, and that was kind of true on that tour that they did, with Cory. Like, they had the whole rest of the tour, the shows were sold out already in Canada, like all those gigs. I think they missed like one gig after Cory died. I'm not sure. I don't know exactly how many, but it just, I just can't imagine that shit. I mean, they stayed on the same bus, on the same fucking bus, like riding, but yeah, like with the thing with Pete, we had, the cameras were rented, the lights were rented. So like, the next, brought Liz Fairbairn, who was our manager at the time, drove up and picked us up from the hospital, and we drove back down to Richmond and shot the fucking video for Jack Your World. And one of the other tunes that's on that record, I can't remember what it was, but we did a Nitro Burning Funny Bomb, I guess. We did those 2 videos with Tim Harris wearing the flattest costume.
Wow.
So yeah.
So I mean, man, that's, I can't, this is crazy. Like, all this stuff that you kind of read about, you can only, I guess when you hear about it from the person who was there experiencing it, it puts a whole different light on it, and you're just like, how did you guys manage to get through this? Like, what is it about you as people and the band together that, like, you just keep pushing forward? And I think it's a cool thing to hear that you guys have and continue to do so.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at that 2 different ways, man. Like, I have to say that in the moment, that had something to do with me leaving the band, because, you start to feel like, it was just very hard for me to process it. Like, you know, the fact that, like, I didn't like, in other words, that we didn't, that we shot that video. Like, I remember that stuck in my craw a lot, right? Like, you know, probably because I was there and I, what I had gone through and, you know, what I watched Mike go through, knowing that, you know, Pete's up there and we had no idea. I mean, by that time we knew he was going to be okay.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not like, you know, and I think that's probably the only reason we continued on and did it, but it still felt really weird to me. It didn't feel good. And, you know, so like it definitely sort of, it did sort of sour me on GWAR at the time that happened. But it's interesting because, you know, like I said, I mean, the band is like, you know, it's always been, that's another sort of function of the way that GWAR is unlike any other band. And they really are. I mean, like, you know, there's no, and it's not the costumes and shit that makes it unlike any other band. It's how it's structured and the way it works. Like, you know, Kiss and Slipknot and Alice Cooper, like, you know, the people who make that shit that they wear or the effects that they do on stage aren't in the band.
Yep.
And in GWAR they are. So, like, you know, it's very different in that way, you know. So it's like there's a group of musicians that are up there, but like, you know, when we ride over the border, like, you know, our manifest and the list of people that are in that band is, you know, it's not 5 people. You know, it's way more than that, and they're not crew, right? We're not treating them like crew. They're members of the band. So, you know, it's a very different sort of thing, but like, yeah, I mean, that aspect of the show must go on. I mean, like, you know, so like, yeah, I mean, that's another piece of adversity that people kind of forget, you know, that happened. But it was a very serious thing that had lasting impact. You know, Pete had some health conditions already that really complicated for him.
Jeez.
And, yeah, so, I mean, you know, because he had to have I mean, not to get in too far into detail about it, but basically, like, you know, the bullet went in his lower back, on the right side and came out of his, like right under his shoulder blade, in his front side. So like, you know, along the way, it just kind of cut this swath of destruction in there. And, that's what bullets do, you know. I mean, so he had to, once they had patched all that stuff up, you know, they wound up, there were things that they did and sort of things that, you know, surgeries that Pete had previously, or, you know, previous sort of conditions that really complicated his recovery. But he did recover quickly. And we did the touring for that album, you know, like, I mean, it was delayed a bit, but, you know, we went out and did it. So, yeah, I mean, GWAR's a band that, like, has really sucked it up a lot through the years and can survive just about at this point, you know. So, I mean, I think, like, you know, losing the people along the way, it's just like, it's a band that's just fucking tough as nails, man. Like, you're not going to, you know. I will say this, and people, surprisingly, what I think will, like, you know, people have asked me before, you didn't ask me, but I'm going to volunteer this right now.
Go for it.
Another way that I think GWAR is unusual is that, you know, it survived all of these things. It survived Cory's death. It survived Dave's death. It survived Pete getting shot. It survived being on a label that, like, wound up folding, which was DRT Records. You know, it survived getting dropped by Warner Brothers. It survived a lot of different things, setbacks over the years. But I think that what it would not survive is the loss of those artists who are putting it on stage, right? Like In other words, we're not going to go out like Matt McGuire and Bob Gorman, and to some degree Don Draculich, who still works with the band, and then we have other people that we hire to work on things, right? But without those two guys, or probably even one of those two guys, I don't think it would continue. Right? Like, that's not a loss it could survive. And I don't think it would have survived it even with Dave in the band. Like, because that's what is the heart of GWAR, is, the people who make the costumes and the effects and who perform on stage that aren't that aren't playing an instrument. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a complete package. You have artists and you have musicians, and together it makes this whole cohesive thing that just works.
Yep.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah,
but it is different. I mean, you say that about, like, I don't know, it's just so weird, right? Like, I mean, I like Slipknot. I think they're a great band, and they certainly have made more money than we have, and they're one of the biggest metal bands there are, but, like, I mean, I don't. GWAR's just different, man.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, you lose those guys who are putting that product up on stage, and even I think with Dave, the one thing about Dave is that he was also a visual artist. Like, he made, so he helped make costumes. Not many people know this, but Casey did as well. Casey Orr, when he joined the band, sort of joined the ranks of the art. Yeah, we were lucky in that sense. But, like, I mean, just I don't think that we could continue on if Matt or Bob really sort of hung up the towel.
Yeah, because I guess with, like, making costumes, that's like a huge brunt of the work. Effects aren't easy, man. That's one thing I admire the most.
Right, and we couldn't replace them. Like, it's not their ability that would make them irreplaceable. It's their attitude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because their attitude is so distinctively slave pit that, you're not going to find artists who are willing to work under those circumstances, except for guys who were conditioned to do so when they were, 15 and 16 years old, right? Like Matt and Bob had been when they joined the band. They were young guys when they joined that band, and they learned from some older guys who were making the costumes how to think about it, and that's still how they think about it, for better or worse.
I mean, that's good to have. I mean, when everybody's on that same creative level there too, it's got to feel good, as a group and individually, that you can all just be on the same page about all this stuff too.
Oh, it does. It does. It feels good. But it's, definitely a weird, it's unusual, man. It is unusual. And, like I said, I mean, you're just never going to assemble a group of people that are sort of that selfless, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make, just work in the anonymity that is GWAR, it's pretty interesting.
So you mentioned about getting dropped from the label. Was this around the same time as This Toilet Earth?
This Toilet Earth was the record.
Okay. It was because of that controversy with the BDF song?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And Warner Brothers wasn't really. So what had happened was that Metal Blade had gotten distribution through WEA, which is, at the time, I don't even know if these business structures are still in place, but WEA was the sort of record label side of Warner Brothers Entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
With WEA as the distributor, it was kind of like this little corporate merger, and Metal Blade immediately started seeing the benefits of that, right? And they tried to expand, like, they're the Goo Goo Dolls
Yes.
were on Warner Bros. And we're on Metal Blade, and they put out one Goo Goo Dolls record, and then they promptly, the Goo Goo Dolls got picked up, and that was kind of like, what we thought would happen with GWAR, and we were actually kind of hoping for that, right? We were going to have a major label distributing our stuff. It would be on Metal Blade, but the opportunity seemed there to be there that, if we went out and sort of we're selling some records, then we would be lucky enough to maybe make the change over to a major label. But that's not how it happened, because right around the same time there was a controversy with Ice-T putting out Cop Killer, and so there had been there was some problems with that. Anything that came out on Warner Brothers during that time period went through a screening by their attorneys, and Baby Dick Fuck didn't make it through the screening. They were like, we're not going to put this out, and we weren't really dropped as much as they said, you have to take this off the record.
Mm-hmm.
And we said no. We were like, no, we're not going to do that. And in retrospect, that was kind of a mistake, right? Because it delayed the release of that album a great deal. I remember that it was kind of okay for us because Pete had been shot, right? Well, our guitar player's in the hospital anyway, so we don't care. We'll wait it out. We'll sort of hold out until they say, yes, we will put it out, but they never did, and it came out, we eventually relented. The record came out. Some copies of it have Baby Dick Fuck on it, some don't. I don't know if that song was really worth it, right? It's not a great tune, right? I wrote the music, but it's not one of my better numbers. It's pretty funny on Brockie's part. The chorus is funny.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, that's the story behind that. So I said we got dropped, but really what I meant was that the record got shelved for a while until we sort of agreed on how the release was going to go.
On one hand, I don't see a problem with sticking to your guns. At the end of the day, it's just a song. It's not gonna harm people too much unless people, especially nowadays, everybody takes everything way too fucking personally and seriously. But I don't think there's anything wrong with sticking to your guns. It does suck that was the outcome of sticking to your guns there. And it's funny too, is that song is not on any of the streaming services. I couldn't find it. I had to go to YouTube to find it, because I was like, wait, I know I've heard this song, but I don't remember it. And it's not on there at all.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's still probably causing some problems. Wouldn't surprise me. But it was. I don't know. There were a lot of really complicated things back then going on.
Yeah. So I just got a couple more things here to ask you, and I won't take up any more of your time. But I guess kind of building off of that, was there ever a time with the band where you had a song about some fucked up subject matter where somebody was just like, no, we can't fucking do that. We're not gonna do that.
Weirdly enough, Brockie, yes, there has been times when that happens, but it's probably not what people would expect. It was never Dave writing stuff. It was usually somebody else in the band.
Okay.
Writing something that was really weird. And, an example would be, and Brockie had this way of softening that stuff so that it would, so that it did work. But he would soften it just with humor, you know. And an example of that would be, what the fuck is happening down here with this shit? An example of that would be Rock and Roll Never Felt So Good, right? Which was on America Must Be Destroyed. Like, you know, the lyrics were really rough. You know, it was like about fucking this quadriplegic and, you know, it wasn't very palatable.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I remember about that is just that Brockie took those lyrics and made them a little more funny so that it really, you know, did work in that context. You know, but like, yeah, I mean, definitely, there's definitely been times when people wrote something that we weren't all comfortable with. And if that happened, then we just didn't do it. I mean, nobody, you know, it wasn't like a big deal or anything. We just sort of not do the song. And it didn't feel like a compromise or anything.
Well, that's good. I mean, you know,
yeah.
as much as you guys like push the envelope on that stuff, I do think there has always been a bit of humor involved. And I think that's what makes the, you know, dark subject matter at least a little bit more palatable, in my opinion. You kind of have to take it at face value.
Sure. Right. Absolutely.
So I guess the final thing here, man, this record's 25 years old. Like, what are you most proud of about it, you know, standing the test of time? And do you think it'll continue to stand the test of time?
Well, I mean, I think that it's one of the better GWAR records, and I think that it will probably continue to be known as one of the better GWAR records. So I do think that it has and that it will stand the test of time. And I'm very glad that it did. You know, I mean, I had a lot to do with it on the music side. Back then, sort of, you know, more so than I do now, right? Like, so it was. Yeah, I mean, I love it. I'm proud of it, and I am surprised in some ways. But like, you know, the thing I always liked best about that record is something that people really can't kind of. It's almost like you have to be inside to understand it,
mm-hmm.
and that is that the record sort of realized the musical potential of me, Brad, Brad and Mike and Pete, right? Like it was, and then Brockie too. You know, it was like a record where there were, like the songs were really good and they were really strong. They weren't all character driven. It was the first record where Brockie really stretched his legs in a sense and started trying to do some, you know, a song like Sonder Commando and a song like, you know, it's not the same as Pure as the Arctic Snow or Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah.
You know, it's a different tune. It's like, you know, it's going outside of the mythos of GWAR. And, you know, it was very cool that way. So yeah, I mean, there's lots to be proud of on it. And also like, you know, just the sound of some of those tunes, it was really original. It was GWAR kind of, you know, I feel like later on the band sort of recognized the value of adhering to a genre, because
mm-hmm.
if they would adhere to a genre, then, you know, they can be associated with it. It becomes easier to figure out what bin to put them in at the CD store, right? Like,
yeah.
And that, you know, that really wasn't true of that record. You know, it's like it had a lot of variety, but a lot of depth too. You know, it's like the tunes were pretty. You know, I think, like I said, I just think that we were pretty much at our best when we made it. And there are some songs that I don't like. I mean, like GWAR 7, even though it's a great story,
Mm-hmm.
the song itself was kind of a a draw play, right? It's like if you ever played Madden, he would say that's a give up play, you know, like and that song felt like that. But like, you know, everything else on it I really loved, you know. And actually even GWAR 7 has some good no, GWAR 7 isn't the one I'm thinking. Well, that and Blimey, those are two that I remember sort of not liking that much. Yeah.
I mean, I think for 1994, when this thing came out, man, it definitely is way different than everything else that came out. And I think, you know, you talk about adhering to a genre. I think the fact that maybe it didn't helped it a lot more back then because of everything that was coming out around the same time. And yeah, it's a very unique album.
GWAR, it is. And, you know, that's what GWAR used to do, was we shaped genre, you know, rather than sort of just adhering to it. I feel like, you know, we definitely were pushing the envelope rather than, you know, just trying to sort of fit in with a particular genre.
I think it's a good thing to do as musicians, always.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Blothar, that is all I have.
Yeah.
I can't thank you enough for doing this, man. This is exactly what I try to get out of people, especially when I'm going through records in years. It's always fun and nice to get the stories behind them, because I think that's part of the history that people need to know about.
Yes, I think so, man. And I'm glad you did this. I'm glad we got to talk about it. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Yeah, next time got some more records doing an anniversary, or even when you guys are doing new stuff, I'd love to have you back on.
No problem, man. I'd love to do it. We got an anniversary coming up for I can't even remember it, but
I know there's two other ones. We Kill Everything is turning 20, and Battle, or one of them's turning 10.
Battle Max.
Yes.
Yeah. Scumdog is I think going on its 30th.
Oh, I think you're right. Shit.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I know.
Well, give all my love to the rest of the Scumdogs, and just keep doing what you guys are doing, man. I fucking love it. I'm glad you carried on, and I think the world would be a much sadder place without GWAR.
Well, cool. Thank you.
Absolutely, man.
Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes!